What's up, breathing people? I'm JC. I'm joined by my wife, Brittany, our dog, Pepper, as always. Today, we're talking about mindfulness. And this is something that just kind of big picture, big theme. It's all about slowing down to be present. That's what mindfulness is. We'll go into a definition of it where we'll get a little more detailed, and we'll go through practices on how this can improve your communication, your relationships, and you as a person. That's our whole channel. We're going to tell you how mindfulness relates to all of those things today. But I want you to get that big theme. It's about slowing down to be present. If you can do that in your life, it will transform every aspect of your life. And this is something that I've only been learning personally in maybe the past 5 years. Probably the same with Britt. And it's just something that we're still practicing. We were just talking before this podcast of how much we need this podcast. So as you journey with us today, just know that we are on this journey with you. We want to implement even some of the things that we're going to tell you to implement. We want to do better at it. We know the concepts, we know the practices, we know the ideas.
We know why it's good.
We know why it's good, but implementing it into our lives is not easy. But we're going to explain the impact. We're going to explain how this can help you so much in your life. So just stick with us. So mindfulness, kind of as a definition, is being present and engaged in the moment, focusing on what matters most without distraction or without judgment. There's a lot of things there that we'll talk about as the podcast progresses, but that's just kind of a definition of what mindfulness is. And just to kind of also tell you where we're coming from. So both Britt and I are both Christians. We grew up Christian. We explored faith for ourselves, not just from what our parents taught us. And we decided that Christianity was the path that we wanted to take in our personal lives. When it comes to mindfulness, that's the worldview that we're approaching it with. And unapologetically, because honestly, as we've learned more about mindfulness and the impact of it, and then we've gone back and we've looked at the Bible has so much to say when it comes to mindfulness in a practice for life. So just as an example, the first that came to mind when we were kind of making the outline for this podcast was Adam and Eve. And I love the story of Adam and Eve, especially the first part. Second part sucks a little bit, the fall and sin came into the world and all that good stuff. But in the beginning, when God created Adam and Eve, and he created them in his image. So the dawn of man was God creating us in his image. So we're all created in the image of the divine, which is a powerful thing, awesome thing, something that changes your life if you let it. But when he created Adam and Eve in his image, there was this time in which Adam and Eve walked with God. And it says in the Bible, in the cool of the day. And that's not just the temperature of the day. There was a calmness and a peace in which they were fully known. They were fully heard, fully seen, and they were fully loved by God. That type of relationship that Adam and Eve had with God is the type of relationship that we want you to have with others. And that comes from practicing mindfulness, where you can be fully heard, fully known, fully seen, and fully loved by someone. That's what we're aiming at. And so right at the beginning of the Bible, we see an example of this. And there's other things that the Bible talks about, whether it's being still and knowing that God is God, or being still and watching God fight your battles for you. And so many examples of that. Giving thanks. There's a ton of examples on gratitude. We've talked about that in the past, and we're just passing the Thanksgiving holiday right now. And so everybody's kind of been in a state where they're thinking about gratitude. That's a biblical idea that has been around for thousands of years. So the Bible to us really reinforces this idea of practicing mindfulness. So I just wanted to kind of give you guys an idea of where we're coming from and how it relates to what we're going to teach you today. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right. What other things? So let's go over how mindfulness connects to self-development.
Mm-hmm.
For us, this has been something that, and you can speak to this too, but for me, I'll just speak for myself right now. This has helped me tremendously, both spiritually and personally. This is a practice that has helped me be way more present in my relationships. It's helped me slow down, become undistracted, become less judgmental when I'm with people. And this is all people. This is with Britt, my wife, and this is with my kids. This is with my friends. It's helped me just have a greater awareness in my life. What has mindfulness kind of impacted you in any specific ways?
Yeah, I mean, I think mindfulness has a huge impact. I feel like it's impacted me in the past before I knew about it, because I was doing some of these things without knowing what I was doing.
Yeah.
But when I became aware of it, I know I was more focused on doing it well.
Yeah.
And I could see the benefits of that, especially when you're practicing the things we're going to talk about in a little bit. But I remember feeling less stressed out, less anxious, and also more in control, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Because I was aware, okay, I recognize that I'm getting nervous. Like I recognize I'm getting nervous about this thing, but then I was able to just be present in the moment and realize that, and then respond instead of react or act in a way that I would regret later.
Yeah.
So yeah, being mindful has helped me just in my relationships, but also just my interactions. I mean, that's relationship too, but my interactions with people that I don't even know that well.
Yeah. I think that like what you're talking about in more control comes from the clarity that comes from being in the moment or being present. You know, there's a clarity both emotionally because you become more aware of how you feel in that present time, you know, because a lot of times we go through life with kind of an idea of what we want to feel, but an unawareness of how we actually are feeling.
Yeah.
And I think practicing mindfulness helps you become aware of how you're actually feeling so that you're not lying to yourself as you go through life.
Yeah.
And so there is more control because now you're more emotionally aware and and you have more emotional clarity. Definitely has reduced stress in my life. It's definitely caused me to just become just a better father, a better husband, because of the awareness too. Like I'm able to navigate a conversation with my kids more effectively because I'm not trying to get out of that conversation quickly because I have other things to do. And that's like, it feels so terrible to say, but I don't think I'm the only person that feels that way. Like when you're talking to your kids and they're just going on and on and on, and you're like, I can wash the dishes right now, or I could be doing this project, or I could be, you know, slowing down and being present with them allows me to fully hear them out. And maybe I'll discover something about them as a person because I took time to do so.
I would say that's the best thing that it helps with in the day-to-day as a mom is being present with your kids. And I'm going to just say right out that it's not easy.
Nope.
Even though you have chances to practice every day. Just today I was talking with my son, or more so he was talking to me, and I just kept thinking in my head, just be in the moment. Especially because I knew this podcast was coming up, but I was like, I had so many things that I wanted to do.
Right.
And I homeschool our kids. So I'm thinking of all the things that I need to do yet to teach them. But I was like, okay, this is important. Like he's excited about what we're doing. I'm just going to listen. Just going to listen. So I just kept having to put aside the other thoughts that wanted to distract me and intrude, and just put them aside and listen to what he wanted to say. And, it's just not easy. All I'm saying is it's not easy, but it will improve the relationship that you have with the people that you're practicing it with.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm thankful for it. I still have a long way to go to get good at it.
Yep. Oh, and I think it's a lifelong journey. I don't think we're ever going to get there, because we're always going to be dealing with and communicating with different people,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to be a new journey. It's going to be a new um, thing to navigate.
Yeah.
Every
It,
one of those situations.
I want to add one more thing too, as like an example that was kind of cool. I feel like when we first we learned this in like a class that we were taking. And so when we had first learned it, it was like recent. There was like a certain strategy. I can't even remember what the strategy was now, but I remember that I was more aware of like what was going on in my head. And I was in this meeting and there was like questions coming at me that were like accusatory, or at least I was taking them that way. And right from the start, this like mindfulness was super helpful because I was able to say, okay, right now in this moment, I feel like I'm being attacked and I feel like these are accusatory questions, but I'm not going to respond in that way because I don't know if it actually is. So I'm going to just straight up answer their questions without any
Assumption.
without any assumption.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do it kindly and respectfully. And I walked away from that meeting like, wow, I surprised myself. Like I surprised myself, and like some of my coworkers were surprised too. And I was like, yeah, I wouldn't have responded like that like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
It would have been a totally different conversation. And but I was thankful for just being aware of how I was feeling, what was going on, so I could respond in a way that was thoughtful and respectful and with clarity.
Yeah. I love it. And I love when you can surprise yourself with the practices that we're going to teach right now.
Yeah.
So we've talked about what mindfulness is, how it's helped us, why it's great. What can you actually do to practice mindfulness? Now, this is where the worldview that we're coming from kind of influences which practices we're going to teach. There's a whole host of mindfulness practices. You probably have seen it on your iPhone. You've seen it if you do a workout app. It's everywhere right now. We're going to teach, honestly, something that I think is actually more practical and more applicable to someone's life immediately than some of just the more open-ended meditative practices. So here they are. So the first practice is stillness and silence. So what this is like it sounds, you getting away to be still and silent for a period of time. And this is something that honestly was so revolutionary to me because I'm a person that needs kind of distraction. And I need like I'm the type of person that like there's always a podcast going. There's always an audiobook going. There's always a YouTube video going. And some of that is addiction. Some of that is like an addiction to distraction. But it's also like I enjoy learning, and I kind of, if I had somebody that would just talk to me about things all day, cool. Like I'd be good with that, especially if we're doing like, I can't do small talk, but if we were doing like deep conversation, I'm like, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
But man, stillness and silence was revolutionary to me for that reason, and also extremely impactful on my mental and emotional well-being because it forces you to slow down from this life that's so cluttered and busy with distraction, with learning, with discipline, with, excellence and whatever else you want to include in there, on self-development even. This is something that mindfulness is self-development that also counteracts some maybe not toxic, but maybe where you go too far in self-development, where you go too far in biohacking, where you go too far in, fill in the blank on whatever thing you're trying to pursue in your life right now. It slows you down to be still, to be alone, and to be with your thoughts. I love this time because it's just helped me, like, for yourself, just as a personal example, think about the last time that you have just took time to think. Probably been a long time. Like not to pray, not to, um, meditate on a passage of scripture or a quote or, something like that. Literally just to be still with your thoughts.
Mm.
Probably a while. In this world that's so filled with distractions, it's difficult for us to stop.
Mm-hmm.
But it is so necessary, and there's so much psychological backing to this that if you just spent time every day with your thoughts, you would have so much less stress and anxiety, because a lot of that stress and anxiety is induced by your inability to kind of think through certain things.
Yeah.
Because you haven't taken the time to think through certain things. So if you were able to give yourself that time to think through a problem, to think through a difficult relationship or parenting, strategy or whatever it is, you would have less stress and anxiety about that thing. So it's just a really, really good practice. In a Christian tradition, this practice has been around for literally centuries, where people would teach how to get away, to be still and be silent and just be present with God. That in the Christian practices, that's been something that the monks have practiced for hundreds of years. And it's something that you can still practice today, no matter what your religious background is, with just being still and being silent and being present of where you're at.
How long would you suggest people start out with that?
So this is something that you're going to have to decide for yourself. It might feel really good to be still and silent for a long time.
That's me. I want that.
You like that. That's what I'm saying.
I need that.
Because I've taught this to a lot of people, I know that that's not the norm.
Okay.
The norm is I can't do this. The norm is as soon as I try to be still and silent and in solitude, like I go away to have that solitude, my mind won't shut off. What I would say to that is, one, this is a practice, which means it's something that you'll get better at over time. So you'll be able to go longer periods of time being still and silent, but also don't be afraid of your thoughts.
That's what I was going to say, is that's not really a bad thing, right? The stillness and silence is a place for your mind to let it unravel a little bit.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. I think there's value to more of the Eastern meditative practices, which are trying to clear your mind. This isn't that. There can be times where you try to clear your mind and just kind of be present, in a Christian context. Again, I'm trying to be present with God because I believe that there's a relationship that I have to God and with God. And I want to, like any relationship, learn how to be with him, not talk to him, not him talk to me, but just be with that person that I'm in relationship with. So that's from a Christian perspective. But yeah, I truly believe that it's totally okay also to have a thought or have a something that you're focused on, and you're just letting your mind ruminate and think through that thing for an extended period of time where you're just silent and you're in a place of solitude, meaning you're free of distraction. That's all that means. And you're able to just think freely. Yeah.
Would you suggest to, like, if someone is not necessarily meditating or thinking on a certain thing, like, how would you guide somebody who wants to implement this, but they just find themselves sitting there in the stillness and silence and they just like are going in a ring around with their thoughts?
Yeah. What I would do in that type of case, because I deal with this when I am just trying to clear my mind and just be present with God. What you do is you allow that thought to come in. You don't try and fight it. Allow it to fully come in, acknowledge it, and then let it go. Don't try and fight it, because it's just going to keep coming back
So
until you let it in.
don't try to fight it and don't try to fix it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just let it. It's okay for it to like just run under the bridge.
If that's what if that's
the goal.
Right. If the goal of that time is clearing your thoughts, then you need to allow it in so that you can acknowledge that thought and let it go.
Yeah.
You can't just try and ignore it because it will pester you the entire time.
And so the way I would do this is, so tell me if this is what you mean when you say acknowledge it and then let it go. Like when a thought would come in, because I have this happen to me all the time where my thoughts just make circles around in my head. It's really annoying. So I would experience the thought, acknowledge it in my head, just being like, yeah, that's how I feel about that, or that's how I think about that. And that's okay. And then just let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
So it's not like you're trying to, like, you're just going to rethink that thought again and again, like actually intentionally acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Just so that you can let it go.
Well, just like you're trying to be present with God, or just like you're just trying to be, maybe just clear your mind and be in that moment, be with that thought. Like, be present with that thought. I wonder why I'm thinking this. That's interesting. But that's not what I'm focused on right now. And I've acknowledged it. Now I can let it go.
Yeah.
You know,
I think that's partly why those thoughts go around and around in our heads, is because we're not letting ourselves fully think the thought,
right.
If that makes sense.
Right. No,
it's just like an anxiety that's up there in our head that we keep thinking about, and it's making us nervous or making us upset or whatever it is, but we never acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And move forward.
Right. And this is a little off topic, but it goes to something we were talking about earlier when you have an idea, and if you don't like focus on that idea and be present with it and figure out more about it, if you don't investigate it right away and you just leave it to your mind's, devices, which your mind is going to go everywhere.
Yeah.
And your mind's going to bring so many unrelated things into that idea that don't belong. And if you just investigated it right away, it would be a more kind of focused idea.
Yeah.
Without all of the things that, because we can make ourselves anxious about things. I've done this all the time that have never even occurred.
Yeah.
And that's only because I haven't decided to focus on it right away.
Yeah.
I let it just stew in my mind, and then it became something I got anxious about. And I'm like, this hasn't even happened. It's not even happening right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is just something I've come up with
living
myself.
In an alternate reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can do that. So don't live in an alternate reality in your mind. Be present where you're at with your thoughts. Allow those thoughts to come in, be present and attentive to them.
Yeah.
Pay attention. Just like when I'm trying to be with God, I'm paying attention to my being. I'm not trying to pay attention to what I want to get from God. I'm not trying to pay attention to, what he can bring to me. I'm attentive to my being with him.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in our human relationships.
Yeah.
When we're present with somebody, it's being attentive to that presence with the person.
Yeah. I think that's another thing worth pointing out is, I know we're trying to get to mindfulness ourselves, but I've been impacted by people as well who have been like very mindful people, and like they're just very present in the moment. And it's a very contagious kind of I don't know, personality trait.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, for
sure. All right. So that's stillness and silence, or stillness and solitude, however you want to kind of define it. But it's something where you need to be still, meaning you need to be in one spot, and then you need to be silent. This is not a time for, expressive prayer. This is not a time for music to be playing in the background. This is a time for you to be alone with your thoughts, or alone with the lack of thoughts. either of those, and you can do a little bit of both. And I think both are actually really effective to do. There should be a time where you're focused on your thoughts. There should be a time where you don't focus on your thoughts, and you learn how to do both.
Yes.
Because both are important. Second, practicing gratitude. This is you might think that this is just a biohacking, practice, but this is a practice, like I said at the very beginning, that has been around for thousands of years. There is so much scripture in the Bible and in other religious texts on being thankful or grateful for what you have, where you're at, that you're alive today, that the whatever you can think of, being present with the reality around you and being grateful for the aspects that you can be grateful for completely transforms your mindset. You can have a more positive mindset in your life if you practice gratitude.
Yeah.
So
I love that one because you don't think of it as a mindfulness practice, but as you investigate it, you realize it is, because it is grounding you. It's like a grounding exercise where it brings you fully present outside of your fears and anxieties about tomorrow or today that haven't happened yet. And it brings you back to, I'm thankful that I'm breathing today.
Yep.
I'm thankful for my spouse. I'm thankful for this house. I'm thankful for my dog. I'm thankful. Like, it brings you back to reality in a positive way.
Right.
And not a negative way.
Right. And you can live a life that has a ton of negative in it and be positive about it.
Yeah.
And that's completely through your mindset. And gratitude is the shift of your mind towards positivity.
Yeah.
Everyone has things in their life that are negative. Everyone. You are not alone if you think that you're the only person that has fill in the blank happen to them or happening to them right now. You're not alone. Someone else is experiencing exactly what you're experiencing right now.
And it's a practice like any other practice. If you practice focusing on the negative stuff, you're going to see the negative stuff
everywhere.
Everywhere. And it's going to feel overwhelming. But if you practice focusing on what you're grateful for and what you can be thankful for, you're going to notice that as well.
Yeah. I remember listening to a podcast with Robert Kennedy Jr. And he was talking about, and I think he learned some of this from being in recovery, being in alcohol. I think his was drugs, but the AA meetings, and how, he learned a lot of mindfulness practices like gratitude in those meetings. And from that, he got to a point in his life where he just came to the realization that the negativity, the complaining wasn't improving his life in any way, which we all kind of know that, but we dance around it because it feels good to complain. It feels good to point out the negative. It feels good to be critics in our life.
And that's also where this mindfulness comes in as well, because if you can think that that negative thought's going to come into your head, right?
Yeah.
And if you can acknowledge it and say, yeah, I'm unhappy about that, or that stinks, then you've practiced acknowledging it, but then also letting it go.
Yeah.
So that you can then go back to focusing on and seeing what you're grateful for.
Right. Right. So ways that just to wrap it up. So he decided that from now on, I'm going to wake up every day, and this is the what I'm going to get to now, journal what I'm grateful for. Every morning he does this, and it's completely, according to him, shifted his mindset to a more positive mindset where every day is a blessing. Every day is something that he's looking forward to, even if it's going to be a really busy day, even if it's going to be a hard day, even if it's going to be a day with sleepless nights, and he just knows that he's going to have some hard conversations or whatever it is. He's positive about that day because he started it with gratitude, and he did it through journaling. So if you want to practice gratitude, a great way to do this is by keeping a journal. And what that does is it helps, and this is something that we've talked about too with, when you have those cyclical thoughts that just keep swirling around in your mind, journaling is a great way of getting them out and putting them down on paper. And there's something about having it out on paper that reveals the truth about the idea or thought or problem or whatever it is that you've written down. And when you see it written out, you're able to assess it outside of yourself because now it's on paper. It's not in your head. It's here. So it's that separation helps you to be more truthful about it and say, this is a dumb idea or this is not really that big of a problem or whatever it is. So when you're able to also get out of your head, like maybe you kind of know what you're grateful for. Once you write it down and you're able to read it, you're almost reciting back to yourself all the things that you should be grateful for. That's such a powerful thing when you're reading to yourself all of these things that you have to be grateful for in your life. It hits different.
Yeah, it's a different perspective and it's like a confirmation of what you know, but now you really know it.
Yeah. And if you want to take it a step further, share some of these things that you're grateful for with other people. This is an awkward one because we live in such a pessimistic, negative society that enjoys, if you've ever worked in an office or if you've ever worked in retail or food service or anything like that, I've been in all of them. It's easy and almost unifying to complain. It's almost, what brings the office together is being negative about where you're at and what you're doing and the workplace that you're in. It's not helpful. It doesn't make you feel any better at the job that you're in. And it's ineffective at moving whatever you're doing forward. So one thing that you could do is start practicing. If you've journaled things that you're grateful for, include people you're grateful for, include attributes of those people that you're grateful for, and share it with them. Like, hey man, I was just thinking about all the things that I'm grateful for today. And I thought of you and just the way that you always are able to go out and get us lunch and pick up whatever we order on Grubhub or, like it doesn't have to be big. It's the little things that you're able to invest in other people that you're thankful for and that you're grateful for in their lives. That makes a huge difference and could shift culture in your workplace, in your home, in your church, in your community, by just sharing your gratitude with others.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the third thing, anything else on that?
No.
Okay. Third thing, again, just remember in all of these practices, we're talking about slowing down so that we can be more present. That's the big thing. Slow down, be more present. Third practice for mindfulness is breath and body awareness. Now, this is where we do start to sound a little new agey, a little, let's practice some yoga, not exactly what I'm talking about, but there is some things that have come out of these traditions and these kind of spiritual, if you want to call it that, traditions, like breath work and breath work and body awareness as a part of mindfulness. And so one of the things that has nothing to do with yoga or any of these kind of traditional things, it has everything to do with trying to think psychological kind of studies, has been on ways that you can pay attention to your breathing to immediately reduce stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
And one of these practices, and I learned this a long, long time ago, and it's been extremely helpful to me, and it might be helpful to you if you're stressed out right now, is someone told me to breathe in for 7 seconds through your nose, where you just, and you try to get as much into your lungs as possible, and then you breathe out through your mouth. And you do that until all the breath has left your lungs. And you do that 3 or 4 times. And by the end of that, you will reduce your heart rate, you will reduce your stress levels, and you'll just immediately start to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so there's 2 things there. There's the slowing down, because you have to slow down to breathe like that.
And you have to focus just on that probably because
Right.
you're counting in your head.
Yeah.
And you're doing that physical action of like you said, pausing, stopping what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're paying attention to how your body is functioning. A lot of times I know when I'm struggling with stress or anxiety and I pay attention to my body, I get more stressed and anxious. I don't know if that happens to you, but like that happens to me a lot. And like my heart rate just starts going up and I'm like, oh, darn, I should not have like paid attention to the stress and anxiety that I'm feeling right now. But when I turn and I do this breath work where I breathe in through my nose until my lungs are full, and then slowly you're just releasing that air slowly as much as you can, that immediately starts to reduce a lot of the stress and anxiety that I'm experiencing.
I'm laughing because I'm like, I feel like I need to do this right now.
Just talking about it's like stressing you out.
I'm like, I need to try this.
That's so funny. That's so funny. But overall, that's one practice. There are so many apps out there now that allow you to practice breath work. And it helps you to pay attention to your physical body. I think sometimes we go through life not paying attention to our physical body. We live in our heads. We live in our thoughts. We live in our minds. I know we're talking about mindfulness, but mindfulness is present with our whole surroundings, which includes us, our bodies.
Yes.
So we want to make sure that we're doing practices that help us pay attention, not just to our thoughts, but also to our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we're present with our bodies, it just, like you've talked about with other practices, it grounds you.
Mm-hmm.
It grounds you into the present moment that you're existing in. When you breathe like that and you pay attention to it, you're paying attention to the fact that you have life.
Mm-hmm.
You have value because you have life. And that's such a beautiful thing and something to be grateful for.
Yeah.
You are a living being.
Yeah, it's all connected.
It is.
And being mindful of your physical body is also helpful, especially for some people who have like physical reactions from their emotions that they're not aware of yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can become aware of what it feels like to be at peace and calm, then you can know, okay, my palms are literally getting sweaty.
Yes.
Maybe something is wrong.
Yeah.
Or I have a pain in my chest now, or the pit of my stomach.
Yep.
I need to become aware of what's going on because something's happening inside of me.
Yep.
Why? And what do I need to do? And so being aware of not just your, like you said, not just your thoughts, but your body is going to help you just be aware of what's going on so you know how to respond.
Right. Because manifestations in your physical body are telling you something about your mental emotional state.
Mm-hmm.
And paying attention, like Britt's saying, to a pain you have in your chest or in your gut, paying attention to those things a lot of times will help bring up things that are going on in your emotional state.
Mm-hmm. That needs to be addressed.
That needs to be addressed. There is a manifestation there of something going on deeper than just that physical manifestation.
Mm-hmm.
So pay attention to those things. And breath work teaches you how to pay attention to your body better. And going back to the stillness and silence, or stillness and solitude, employing breath work before you go into those practices is really helpful.
Yeah.
Like I'll do that sometimes when maybe I've been in a state where I've been distracted by podcasts and YouTube all day. And then I come to a point where I want to be still and silent. I'll do a little bit of breath work to just kind of settle in to that practice.
Yep.
So it's something that you can incorporate in all of these practices, is that physical awareness, so that I can have even better mental awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Real world application. So, how do we take this mindfulness that we have just gained from doing all of these practices to be more mindful? How does this actually affect how we communicate? This goes back a few podcasts ago to something we talked about, which was active listening. If you are able to listen actively, you are more present or mindful in the communication that you're having
Yeah.
with the person that you're communicating with.
Mhm.
So this is something, active listening is 100% another tool of mindfulness.
Right.
It's just incorporating it into communication.
Yeah.
So that's something that is extremely helpful. Another thing that I just wanted to kind of bring up, if you want to see how this was done well, go read the Gospels.
Mm.
Go read specifically the stories of when Jesus started his ministry and he was interacting with so many different people. Like, because we interact with a lot of people in our lives. A lot of times it's the same people. Like, yes, when we're out in public, there might be someone we're, interacting with at the grocery store, the gas station, or something like that. But for the most part, we're dealing with the same people.
Mhm.
Jesus had to deal with so many different people because he was traveling abroad and having to deal with people in different, parts of the country and different, religious affiliations and different backgrounds and occupations. And he had to deal with such a range of people. And if you read his interactions and you look at how he acted in them, it really is able to capture what a mindful person looks like in their interactions and communication.
Yeah.
I
think Jesus is such a great example of not being so caught up in your own life and thoughts and being able to talk with someone and really care about them. Because when you're able to put aside your own thoughts and life and goals and intentions, like all the things that you've got going on, and be with someone in that moment, you're able to truly know them and kind of have an understanding of what are their needs, what is going on with them, because you're not distracted by your own thoughts. And
Yeah.
I think Jesus is such a great example of that. And I've seen that in our lives as well. When we do this well, is we're able to focus on the conversation that we're having with the person that we care about. We're able to focus on what they're actually saying and what their, like, the heart and what they're meaning behind it. And it's very helpful to understand them and draw closer to them in a relationship with them.
Right. He was always really good at figuring out why that person was there in whatever conversation he was having, whatever interaction he was having. He was aware of their purpose for being there.
Yeah.
And I think that only comes from being present.
Yeah.
Like you said, it wasn't about what he wanted to do and accomplish and talk about. It was always about, why are you here? What do you want? What is your reason for wanting to interact with me?
Yeah.
And if we all went through life and went through our conversations with other people with the intention of finding that out,
Yeah.
like, hey, what are you trying to gain from this conversation? Hey, what could I say, do, help you with that, has brought you to me at this time, in this moment?
Yeah.
And just really had that kind of deep heart investigation.
Right.
As we're communicating with someone, it would make your relationships and your communication so impactful.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, I think Jesus is a great example of that. So go read the Gospels. Mindfulness and relationships. This is something where it's interesting when you become more mindful. And again, talking about awareness, you are aware more of what triggers you.
Mm-hmm.
And that awareness of your triggers helps you to not be triggered as easily
Yeah.
in your
Or
relationships.
respond instead of react.
Exactly. You're able to come into whatever interaction that is with more of a, I'm not going to be reactive. I'm going to have a more measured response to this triggering,
Yes.
whatever it is, conversation or, thing that this person did.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's how mindfulness can really help in relationships specifically. We talked about communication, but in relationships specifically, there are triggers that our awareness of is going to help us to navigate those more effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else on relationships that you can think of?
I mean, I feel like we already gave examples of this. I feel like this is what helped me in that meeting that I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Is I was responding instead of reacting.
Yes.
In that moment.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. There's something to, I've noticed this in relationships as well, where, I will, and this kind of goes to your point that do you want to speak? Do you have something to say?
Yeah, she does.
Hello. Hello. But yeah, I've noticed what, oh my goodness, you crazy woman.
Come here, Pepper. Come on. Stay down.
I've noticed this in my relationships where, because I'm a chronic, have my answer for what you're talking about before you're finished talking about it. I don't know if anybody else does that, but I'm guilty of that. And when I've been able to shut that off and listen to the person and then actually take a second, because now I need a second, because before I was thinking about my response to what they were saying and could just boom, come back with it.
Yeah.
But if I don't do that, then it forces me to actually take a pause after that person has communicated to think through what I want to say back.
Yeah.
Because I haven't had that time now. So now I have to think about it. And then when I do that, it's a more measured response. It's a more thoughtful response. And I've noticed that specifically in the workplace. When I've had a coworker that I'm talking to, you're busy, you're trying to get other things done, and then they want to talk to you. It's so easy to just get in the habit of just like, how can I get through this conversation as quickly as possible? Not that I don't care, not that I don't want to talk to them, not that I don't want to help them in whatever we're discussing, but I want to get back to what I was doing.
Yeah.
But I'm like, nope. I want this conversation to be effective. I want this conversation to make them feel heard, known, seen, and loved.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just hear them and then think about it and then respond.
Yeah.
And it's honestly, it's really helped my responses to them. And then it's also just helped people feel like they've walked away from a successful conversation.
Yeah.
Where they've really gained something from that conversation. It wasn't just a throwaway.
Yeah. It helps you take out your agenda. Like you have to lift up and take out your agenda so that you can have a conversation. That being present is what I'm talking about. Being present and mindful in those conversations helps you to not carry along your agenda into it, which will affect it and pull you out of being present. Yeah.
So then I just kind of last thing I'll say in taking this mindfulness into our daily lives is we can do this anywhere. So we're giving you specific practices that are like times in which you will practice mindfulness, but this is something that you can implement into anything that you're doing on a daily basis. When you're waking up in the morning and you're drinking your coffee, are you taking a moment while you're drinking that to be grateful or to be still or to just be, like this is a moment instead of just me drinking a cup of coffee so that I can wake up? Is this a moment? Make it a moment. Why not?
Yeah.
And that's another way that you can incorporate mindfulness into a daily practice.
Yeah.
And that carries into maybe, I've done this, especially when I was being introduced to these practices of mindfulness. I noticed more like my kids playing
Mm.
or interacting with each other, and me just kind of wanting to watch.
Yeah.
Like I would put down my phone, or I would, shut off the TV, or I would stop a conversation I was having with you just so that I noticed something happening
Mm-hmm.
with my kids that I was like, I want to remember this.
Yeah.
This is a moment. And I decided to be aware.
Yeah.
I decided to be mindful and present for that moment.
Yeah.
Because I want that to be ingrained in my memory. I want that to be something that I come back to years from now and think about.
Right.
So that's another way of after you practice these, after you do the practices of mindfulness, it'll help you to be aware of the moments in your life that you're going to want to be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just another thing. Challenges, there's always challenges when you're doing a new thing. I would say consistency is probably the biggest challenge that you're going to face when trying to incorporate mindfulness into your life.
Oh, yeah.
How do I know this? Because I haven't been consistent.
Yeah.
That's how I know this.
That's the hardest part.
It's so difficult in life because life comes in waves. Life comes in these kind of seasonal waves that cause you to be really disciplined and really just on the ball for one part, and then completely fall off the cliff
Yeah.
the next.
Mm-hmm.
And it sucks.
Yeah.
But it is the reality. So if you can make this a habit,
Yes.
meaning that it is a scheduled occurrence that happens on a daily or weekly basis in your life, that will make it easier for you to be consistent. Make it a part of your daily schedule, just as you would do with drinking your morning coffee or just as you would do with brushing your teeth. Make these practices of mindfulness, because just like we think that brushing our teeth will keep our teeth from decaying, practicing mindfulness will help our relationships and communication to not decay. If we take it seriously like that, we can make it into a habit that will help us stay consistent.
Yeah. I think what's most helpful to keep consistent is making the time for it, like you said, but then coupling it with a habit that you already have. Would probably be the most helpful. If you can make the space for it in your schedule and then just couple it right along whatever habit you already got going, whether it's, you exercise each morning. So then you take some time after you exercise or before you exercise, or I don't know, whatever habit that you already have in your life that you feel like coupling stillness and silence after that or before that would be helpful, do it then. Because then that will be like your little reminder, oh, I'm doing this now, which I always do. It's already a habit. And so now I'm also going to do this. I feel like would be the easiest way, at least for me. I know that's what is helpful for me.
Yeah. Another challenge that people may experience, and I've experienced this a few times, is it might get uncomfortable. There might be emotions that arise when, let's say, you're practicing stillness and silence. Maybe stillness and silence is a little scary.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because you're actually having to be alone with your thoughts. And maybe your life is avoiding your thoughts.
Yeah.
Because you have memories and you have experiences and you have trauma and you have things that you just don't want to dwell on. It can bring up in those times emotions that you're scared to deal with. I would encourage you that there is freedom on the other side of dealing with those emotions. There is freedom on the other side of paying attention and becoming aware. There's freedom on the other side of learning to be present.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes yourself, with yourself.
Yeah.
You deserve to be heard, seen, known, and loved. Like I want you to have someone else experience that you're in a relationship with. But I want you to experience that.
Yeah.
And that only comes from you taking the time to be present with yourself.
Yeah.
So it might be scary, but I just beg you to stick with it. Get help if you need to, like in the early stages, if maybe every time you sit down to be, still and silent with yourself and you're thinking your thoughts and scary emotions come in the early stages, it might be, beneficial to see a therapist, or it might be beneficial to kind of seek out some sort of counsel on how to navigate those emotions that arise. But again, there's freedom on the other side of that. That's always the case. You have to navigate through difficult things to experience the freedom that comes afterwards.
Yeah.
So just stick with it. Just stick with it. Anything else that you could think of that might be a challenge for somebody that are just dealing with, starting to practice mindfulness?
I think the challenge is that you're going to find out that it's hard to do. And so I would say, don't be discouraged by
if it doesn't work out right away.
If it doesn't work out right away, don't be discouraged. Don't beat yourself up. I am the number one person who does that, where I'm just like, I failed, and then I beat myself up. Don't do that. Just be like, okay, well,
because
I'm aware.
Because what does that do when you beat yourself up over it?
It just discourages you from continuing to try.
Exactly.
And so just if you notice that, good job. You were just aware. You were just mindful in that moment that you weren't being mindful before. And so it's just a chance to do better next time. And like we said in the beginning of the podcast, none of us are perfect at this.
No.
It's a lifelong journey of getting better and better at it. And so you're just with everybody else who's trying to get better at it. So just be aware and keep at it, and you'll get there. You'll get better step by step.
Yeah. So I hope this has been helpful in just giving you an overview of mindfulness, an overview of how mindfulness can affect your life. It can affect your communication, your relationships, and you as a person. So I hope that you start to practice this week. Just to go over the practices one more time so you remember them, it's practicing stillness and silence, and I'll just include solitude in that. I want you to go away and to be still and silent and free of distraction so that you can be present with yourself, with God, and just with your thoughts. So the next one is practicing gratitude. Do a gratitude journal or share gratitude with others. And then the last one is, help me out.
The last one is breath and body awareness.
Breath and body awareness. Thank you. I could have done that myself.
I'm so sorry.
But yeah, that one is where you're becoming aware and being present with your physical body, knowing that you are alive, you are breathing, and that is valuable. And you are just aware that that's going on just as your thoughts are happening, just as your emotions are happening. Your physical body is also functioning. And it's something to be aware of as a part of mindfulness. So practice those things. Tell us how any of those goes. If you implement one of those things, that's a success. That's a win. Let us know how it goes in the comments. You can always email us. You can always DM us on social media. We would love to hear from you and how this is going. Anything else that you want to say?
No, I'm going to start practicing these again.
Yeah. All of this to say, thank you for listening. We're going to go do some mindfulness practices now because we really need it. So we love you all. Goodbye.